Chapter 4 Gods, Goals, and Gurus. Our guru played a different part in the temple than anyone else. He was the absolute head of the monastery. Many times he would be entirely incognito to a number of his monasteries. No one, or only a few of us, knew who he was. And then we wouldn't tell anyone unless we had his permission to do so. He would often come to the wall that surrounded each monastery to seek admittance into it, as did so many others. In this way he would see to the general mood of the newcomers and how they were treated, or often he would serve in a monastery at some ordinary type of work with the monastics who did not know who he was. In this way he could train them secretly. For instance, a young monastic may be asked to teach the guru how to milk the animals that preserved our external form, but would not know it was his guru. The guru would fit in all capacities if he chose to do so. Some of the gurus, though, chose to be well known in their monasteries. It depended totally upon them. All gurus would be incognito while traveling. Therefore they would often meet and help us while on pilgrimage to another monastery seeking admittance. Anyone we might meet on pilgrimage might be the guru, and so we all kept a very reverent attitude towards everyone we met. The role of our Mahadevas. The great Mahadevas, our lords, became deified during this time. They would sometimes go beyond manifesting a temporary body on the enthroned pedestal and would actually draw the elements together more closely and form a physical body that would last a moon or two. In this body they would live in our monasteries that were generally so large and well populated that they could move freely about incognito, helping us all in one way or another as the force of their presence disseminated out through us to the gracious lands. The guru's visits to a monastery. Each guru headed many monasteries, and when he took up residence in one of them, and if he chose to let his identity be known, we would all stop everything that we were doing, gather around for periodic instructions in the deeper arts of meditation and samadhi. Festivities and celebration gathered the deities and devas in great throngs, and our monastery began to become the head monastery of them all, depending upon the length of stay of our guru. The hosts of devas that traveled with our guru from monastery to monastery intensified the core in all of us, and when he remained for lengthy periods of time, so did they, and the darshan polarized itself through our walls. When he left to go to another monastery, we felt his presence in the inner ethers. Sometimes he would leave and return a few days later incognito, so we never actually knew in which monastery he existed in his physical body. Teaching through holes in the wall. Long vigils were kept by us, sitting on the inside of the wall. This wall had holes in it through which we spoke when inspired. Many philosophical truths, prophecies, and practical advice were disseminated through these holes in the wall, and if no one were there, we spoke to the wind. This was our method of remaining unidentified and giving the inner teaching freely to the world. On these great vigils we would live alone in a solitary niche and write what came from the depth of our being. Some monastics just sit and write down what comes from the inside and put it away without anyone ever reading it. These writings were never signed, as this shastric book is not signed. The one-third senior minority of the monastery, without reading these writings, would condone them solely upon their vibration, and they would be put into tremendous libraries which have accumulated over the years as the monastics developed them. When a family man became one with us, portions of the library were given to him. He would read, study, and disseminate the teachings to the village folk. The libraries were always being replenished by us with single-copy manuscripts, and large numbers of these manuscripts were supplied family men periodically, which took them and opened schools for the people so that they could study the depth of their beliefs. Our libraries will in time disappear into the Akashic ethers, our prophets say, to be copied down again by monastics of another era. Our secret names or soul tones. When we all arrived on this planet, our history tells us, each one of us had emanating from us a certain combination of sounds or tones. This was the way we spoke, and as we thought, these tones radiated out from our body, changed. The basic tones were our names. After we manifested the first earth body, these tones ceased, and the power of speech came. We always were called or identified by the basic tone of the inner body. But now, so many thousands and thousands of years later, that has been forgotten, and recordings of it only exist in our libraries and are remembered and spoken of by our scholars. Changing names often. When someone comes to our monastery, he's given any kind of name. The name of the place that he came from becomes his name, or some significant story of an experience he may have had along the way. We would derive a name from this or him. Each one of us had many names, and generally, if we pilgrimaged from monastery to monastery, quite often we would be known by a different name in each monastery. None of us had a permanent name. We only associated the permanent name with the history of the basic tone of the inner body that was explained to us by scholars and authority. Some of us knew the combination of our tones, and in speaking with ourselves we always inwardly repeated these. The devas and deities, in speaking to us from the pedestals in the temples, would often call us by these inner names. That is how we came to know them, remaining as pure channels. Our concern was not for the individual members of our monastery, but for the total functioning of the mission of the monastery. Therefore, we did not distinguish ourselves by attaching a personal history to our names. If this began to occur within the monastery, we quickly moved or were sent by the deity to another monastery and were given another name. We have to do this to remain pure channels for the divine force. This was our concern and our custom. The fine art of meditation. When we meditate, we always do so lying down. Meditation was either merging in the self or travel to other planets. The first thing that would occur would be disconnecting our inner body from the physical, and in this body we would enter the inner world and be taught deep things concerning time and space and yugas to come. Great master beings educated us deeply in the knowledge of the Dvapara Yuga as a vast time span which brings this planet into the Kali Yuga. These teachings we discussed among ourselves during the day, and when the morning came, the inner body would connect with the physical, and we would stand up. I remember being told that in the Kali Yuga, vast numbers of people would sit up straight to meditate in an effort to simply calm their thoughts. When we put the physical body into a state of meditation, we placed it in a hole in the wall of the monastery, or in the side of a mountain in a tube. Each of these tubes bored in the wall or in the rock mountain were spaced so that no one was ever directly above the other. This enabled our inner bodies to leave the physical without the obstruction of someone else's physical body above it. These tubes are just the size of our body, and we always entered them at the darkest part of the night. During full moon we did not sleep or meditate at all. Grand meetings on inner planes. On the inner plane during the darkest nights, our entire order, which was the entire population of each monastery, headed up by one guru, would come together all at once and receive instructions from the guru. He would address his entire order. If he had 2,000 or 200 monastics in all his monasteries, he would address them all at night on the inner plane. We always saw him in his resplendent body. In his waking state he was not like this, and employed himself in simple kinds of activities, working with newcomers to the monastery, assisting here and there, except of course at times when he also instructed us on the physical plane. Each guru who had a monastery on the physical plane also had his own structures, vast halls and palaces on the astral plane. In these we would meet and be together. The deity never came during these times. The guru had his monasteries. He was the head of them. The deity had the temple. He was head of it. We took care of the temple. The deity and devas took care of us. Use of gold for power and protection. We had a gold substance that came from the ground, and silver too. Of this we made jewelry to decorate the physical body and make it look like that of the deity and devas. This gold and silver could be seen, even in the third world, glowing. The people in the surrounding countryside would dig it out of the mountains, find it in their rivers and streams, and bring it to us. As was our custom, we kept 1/3 of it in the temple and fashioned jewelry for their bodies from the other 2/3. We prided ourselves in this skill, of which we had many. This gold and silver jewelry made by us carry the darshan from the monastery wherever it was taken. Walking through the monastery and temple, one could see large piles of gold and silver here and there, and in the third world each monastery and temple could be easily distinguished because of the vast quantities of gold and silver it contained. It glowed there as a marker of the destination point so that deities and devas would know where to come. Moving objects with our minds. One of our skills was in moving physical objects from temple to temple with our minds with the help of the devas. This method was also used by us in building our temples and monasteries. Large stones were easily moved in this way. We could apport people also. All these kinds of skills came from the many different radiations of darshan from our gods, who live in the inner world creating new darshans in the akasha to rule the physical world. Our gods constantly watched all of us, carefully giving out darshan in just the right amounts where it was needed most, using any one of us at any time as a channel for this divine grace. Dancing, levitation, and mesmerism. Dancing and levitation were some of our other skills, as well as mesmerism. We could create a burning forest fire in the mind of another, but it would not actually be there, though he would see it. It was in this way we controlled the large and small animals and kept them away from us. All of these skills and many more were quite natural to us. Our prophets tell us that towards the end of the Dvapara Yuga, when the body becomes more dense, we will have to begin developing these skills through intensive practice over a long period of time. Writing books for the Akasha. One such skill has to do with how a book was written. We would not write a book to be seen in the physical world, but to be seen in the Akashic ethers. I am now writing this book in oil with a gold rod. A thin layer of oil is spread on a stone, and upon it I am writing everything that is now being recorded, and it is going into the Akasha. For all time, anyone who is sensitive to reading the Akasha can read this record. Novitiates and initiates, seeking entrance, stood before the outside wall during the day, begging admittance and performing service, like gathering wood or drawing water while waiting to be interviewed. Often they were told of monastery life by the residents. They might remain by the wall up to 9 months, endeavoring to adjust their vibration, both inner and outer, to those within the monastery, so they would fit in transparently. Once admitted, they were given disciplines by the guru, such as carving large statues, then to perfect concentration, carving them smaller and smaller until they fit in the palm. They meditated often, communicating with beings from their home planet. Some chronicled their experiences in books to be transported through fire into the vast Akashic libraries. Om. Easy peacefulness and inner communications reigned in the early days on Earth, but toward the end of the Treta Yuga, mankind eventually evolved two types of communities, those who lived in monasteries and others who settled in individual homes, large extended families of 100 or more. These were days of merging the divine and the instinctive, days of adjustment. Guru Deva. Chapter 5, Monastery Culture. Near the end of the Treta Yuga, many devas were coming back up through the animal kingdom into human bodies, but with animal instinctive nerve systems. Some of us were still in the body brought through the original way. It is very difficult to bring anyone through now. So many of our bodies are thousands of years old. There are 3 kinds of beings on the earth. Those of us in our original body, the devas in the human bodies and the animals. This creates for us a culture partly new and partly that which we brought with us when we came. We are in changing times. Some just go off by themselves to go deep within and try to stabilize the forces of the planet, working closely with the gods. We found that being alone, which is new to us, for we are always with our kind, was very fruitful. Our elders developed this practice and taught many advanced souls how to live alone and polarize the changing forces of our time. Emergence of individual outlooks. The devas who emerged from the animal kingdom quickly learned the culture and religion of our times in our monasteries and temples, and then we sent some out on missions to teach it to others coming into human form. Small groups began to develop for the first time, and philosophies and individual outlooks emerged with the devas who lived in bodies with animal nerves, as they would sometimes call the teachings their own, which began to develop religions with different names. Our prophets tell us that one day everyone on our planet would have an animal nerve system in one degree or another. The core group in original bodies. In the monastery, of course, all had to be in our original body and receive initiation by our guru. The devas in human form came in to study, and some were allowed to stay on, but not many, for they became attached to us. The most important thing for them was to not be magnetically attached to other people. We have always watched to see that this does not happen, for it creates an inconvenient pull of forces, inhibiting us from doing our work in the service of the deities. When they found they were attached to someone in the monastery, they would go to the one to whom they were attached, and they would beg for release from the deity. The deity would cut the sticky substance binding them together physically or psychically. This was the same substance the deity would make his temporary body out of. If these attachments persisted, and it was always those in human bodies that responded in this way, it would finally pull so much on the senior group in the monastery that they would finally suggest that he do tapas by himself, then return to the monastery or pilgrimage to another monastery. Our guru always set the course of the tapas and gave his instructions through the senior group or directly to the deva. Our guru always administered sadhana and tapas. Involvement in inner worlds. Our life was a life of involvement with the inner worlds. We would talk to the devas and among ourselves rather than those of us who lived in surrounding areas to the monasteries. For our main service was to provide the vibration to sustain the darshan and religion through the nerve systems of the people who surrounded the temple, also to write our inner perceptions, clarifying the philosophy during our changing times, and giving these writings to the elders of the external community to share among the population or record them in the Akashic libraries. Sometimes we did both. We would also make golden jewelry and prepare medicinal herbs, but our monasteries were totally introverted during this period of time. It was the elder men of the surrounding community that did the formal teaching and talking to the people, not the monastics, with the exception of our speaking to those elders through the wall as previously described, without allowing our personal identity to be known. Choosing monks from the community. Our guru would choose from the community those he felt would do well in serving in the monastery. The guru always did the choosing, and the training went according to what he wanted. The strands of inner lineage are still very clear. Our guru would know who was living in a certain body, and upon that he based his invitation or direction. The greatest austerity performed by those who entered the monastery from families was that of living away from home. The human families were very, very serene and peaceful. The entire atmosphere of the earth at this time is lush, calm, and sublime. It is easy to live, and family life was very close due to the animal quality of being attracted to one another. So when they come into the monastery, they suffer the breaking of this attachment, and then when it does break, they feel alone. This feeling of aloneness is also from the animal world through the instinctive nerve system. But they know all about this animal nerve system, and this knowledge helped both the family and the monastic when these feelings emerge. A joyous, healthy life. We take our nourishment once a day when the sun is high. The nourishment is always the same. It is a complete chemistry for our bodies. Those who have animal nerve systems eat somewhat differently, and it takes them quite a while to become used to the monastery diet. Everyone was quite satisfied after a meal. They really enjoyed their food. We were always happy and laughing. Often two of us would catch one another's thought and break out laughing. No room for personal identities. In our monasteries were great souls as well as some of the younger ones, but it was almost impossible to tell one from another, for the old souls helped the younger ones by outwardly appearing to be like them. If they had a strong darshan, they would always appear to have none at all, and in various subtle ways deflect any attention drawn to them because of their unfoldment. Everything that we do within these temples is founded with the principle of the elimination and annihilation of our personal identities. The monastery and the temple is one place so integrated in our daily living that there is no room for one of us to be more outstanding than another. If one of the monastery temples needed extra strength, perhaps because something in the surrounding area occurred and there was an excessive draw upon our darshan flow from the pedestal, our guru would send some great soul to us from another temple, one who had lived in it consistently for a long, long period of time. He would traditionally enter our monastery temple as a guest, and unbeknownst to anyone, live and move around through our ranks and procedures while all the time working inwardly, filling the great need which he had come to fulfill. Because he entered as a beginner, his chores were light and his ego vanished, for he was in the process of qualifying himself to become a permanent part of our group. In this way, our guru worked silently, inwardly, and unobtrusively. How a newcomer is evaluated. A newcomer in our midst would humbly beg admittance in asking permission to live nearby the temple. He would work inwardly to strengthen our vibration. Even if he were a younger soul, he would be expected to do this. We would watch him silently and inwardly as the moon became full and waned became full again, until about two-thirds of us came to know him. Our new visitor seeking admittance would always be found standing by the wall that surrounded each temple monastery, either on the outside of the wall if he were just entering, or on the inside of the wall while fulfilling his period of blending his vibration with the total vibration that existed. Sometimes we have many, many standing on the outside of the wall for long periods of time before they are invited in, one or two at a time. Limitations imposed on newcomers. Newcomers would never attend any of our activities unless invited. They lived in small shelters close to the wall and did some useful service to occupy their time when they were not involved in trance. During the day, they would walk around close to the wall, the circumference of it, talking with monastics who would come and visit with them. They would tell of their travel, both inwardly and outwardly, and about themselves. If they appeared to be on tapas, nothing would be given to them to do, and they would be allowed to fulfill their intended practice. For upon entering they would clearly explain the nature of the austerity and the intended purpose to be accomplished by performing it to the one representative of all of us who was responsible for initially visiting them and admitting them. Mystic skills, sacred disciplines. Sometimes we were given by our guru disciplines to strengthen our powers of concentration. Especially the younger souls performed these practices, but occasionally the older souls did as well. We would be given to carve a statue half as tall as any of us, and during the course of its completion, certain chants and meditative practices were performed. When it was completed, our guru would inspect it, and the one of us who created it. If the inner change that he expected did not exist, brought forth from the carving, the chanting and the disciplines within the meditation, he would order it destroyed and begun again. When finally the inner attainment had been made simultaneous with the creation of the statue, the next phase of discipline and carving upon the same statue commenced, and that would be to continue carving on the statue, always keeping it in a perfect state of completion until it began to become smaller and smaller. As this was being done, other kinds of meditations given by the guru were performed, as well as chanting and frequent visits from the deity and devas. It took a long, long time, 10 or 15 years or more, before the statue, which began half the size of one of us, was in its perfect state of completion, small enough to hold in the palm of one's hand. Utilizing the power of such projects. The dust from this constant working on the statue was considered sacred and used in some of our ceremonies, and the last remaining dust, after the statue had become so small it disappeared, was ceremoniously given to our guru as a symbol the discipline had been completed. Some of these statues were never completed, as during the course of working with the discipline, the monastic became so refined within himself, he fulfilled his purpose on the planet and disappeared from here, back to the planet we all came from, in a shimmering subtle body. These statues were considered most sacred and hidden away in mountain caves, sealed in. In this way, we take an entire mountain and infuse it with the darshan by placing here and there within it these emanators of darshan. Some of these mountains and the darshan coming from them will persist through the next 4 yugas. Writing books, conveying information. We also write books, and after a book is finished, it is burned at a ceremony that causes it to be imprinted in the inner ether, and old and young souls alike in other temple monasteries can read it. News is also conveyed in this way. The inner and the outer are one. Our prophets tell us that toward the end of the Dvapara Yuga, as the Kali Yuga begins to be felt, we will make a strong distinction between the inner and the outer. But now, through transference, it is easy to communicate with beings on the planet that we came from, those around us, and in distant places on the earth. It is difficult to conceive how it will be possible for us in the next yuga to refrain from doing what is so natural for us to do now. We experience the total mind. Through the projection of our thought, we are able to make ourselves appear temporarily in other temples and talk with different ones within them. The art is reserved for the older souls, mature in their practice. We also could make ourselves appear in the minds of another and convey to them the news. During certain ceremonies when fire was used, the deity or a great deva would take the smoke and create a temporary body and talk with us. As smoke faded, they would fade. Most of us knew everything to be known on a current basis. They tell us that through the darker yugas, communication will become most difficult, knowledge limited, and we find this difficult to understand as it seems so natural to us now. The special functions of a monastery. We have a tremendous force of power that flows from temple to temple and can be directed where needed. But they say, those who see ahead, that the surface of the earth will change, and the divine energies that we work with will have to be stored away in mountains, to be brought out and used again when the next Sat and Treta Yuga come to this planet. Each monastery temple had its own kind of activity within it, depending much upon the location. Some wrote books for the Akashic libraries. Other monasteries worked in gold. Still others were masters in the carving of stone. Fruits, honey, milk. Nuts and seeds form the basis of the pure and simple Lemurian diet. A most delectable dish called Lemurian prasadam was prepared daily in large vats, made of various combinations of fresh milk, products such as yogurt, along with several fresh fruits, dates, nuts, seeds, and honey from the bees, all gathered from the forests and fields in large baskets, mixed together and eaten from natural gourds. It was a sattvic and invigorating meal, especially for those who deeply meditated. This was all they consumed day after day. To help keep the body flexible and easy to live in, exercises were performed at dawn, noon, and sunset. Working with mental powers, they provided equilibrium for the planet, and nearly everything could be done with the mind, even moving and lifting things. Aum. Foreseeing the future was important in those days, as one main purpose was to prepare the planet for human life. Recipes for daily diet evolved based on a system of health and healing. We, the select inhabitants living within ourselves more than in the outer consciousness, knew when a monastery no longer served its intended purpose and provided a way for it to become a power place of the future. Guru Deva. Chapter 6. Diet and Destiny. The animals that ate the vegetables and gave forth milk were valuable to us. We recognized them to be one of us, caught in the animal kingdom on his way back to human form. We take this milk, and with it fruit, seeds, and nuts. The honey from the bee, mix it all together as our daily portion for the maintenance of the outer form. In large vats this mixture was made, and each one of us had a gourd to hold it while it passed into our bodies, absorbing the energy from our hands. Our four sources of nourishment. Our nourishment is divided into four areas similar to the four great forces of this planet. The first area is the vegetable kingdom, consumed by the cow and other milk-producing animals. This provided the muscular structure with great strength. The next area is the life-giving seeds and nuts and tiny kernels within seeds that provided nerve strength and vigor to our bodies. The third area is the milk of the bee, derived from the subtle pollen of our flowers. This protects our bodies as well as the entire combination within our nourishment from deteriorating forces. This excretion of the bee protects against astral forces promulgated from the animal kingdom indigenous to this planet. The fourth area within our nourishment is the outgrowth of trees and bushes which can be picked without destroying the plant. Thus fruit, seeds, nuts, honey, and milk mixed together in proper combination compose our nourishment. variations according to weather. The proper combination is as follows. When the wind blows from the north, more milk is used than amounts of honey, seeds, or fruit. When the wind blows from the south, more fruit is used to enhance the combination. When the wind blows from the east, the sweetness of honey overpowers, and the west wind brings in an overabundance of seeds and nuts. Wind does not mean simply a breeze. Wind would be that which made waves upon our lake. When the air is cool, milk, seeds, and nuts dominate, and extra honey is added to neutralize this combination. When the air is warm, fruit and honey, seeds and nuts, and milk occur in equal amounts, none standing out over the other, contemplating the temperature. The nuts appearing 2 to 3 inches apart, or measured out as a small handful for each of those of us partaking of this nourishment. On hot days, fruit, honey, and little seeds, milk, and nuts are few. Though we eat them when the sun is high and fill up fully our bodies with this nourishment, we take time and eat long. Should it at any time occur that later in the day, or as the sun is setting, our nourishment is taken, the combination is more of a liquid nature, light and easy to digest, for pure water and spice have been added to the leftovers from the noonday. Nourishment is never taken after dark, when you cannot see to move around and perform your chores, nor before the rising of the sun. Herbal remedies for illness. When the body becomes frail or ill, various herbs that were brought with us from the planet we came from, and strong spice were added to the nourishment and taken before nightfall. This did its work within the body during the night as we left the body for these herbs and spices to work upon, without interference from the inner bodies living in the outer one. If the healing did not occur, no nourishment was taken at noon except for absorbing the rays of the noonday sun, and only the leftover nourishment, with pure water added, herbs, and hot spices to stimulate the currents of the body, was taken at night until full health returned. These herbs are prepared in a similar way as the cow digests the vegetables and grasses. They are mashed and heated and boiled and brewed and preserved and presented to the evening nourishment in such a way that they blend right with it like a milk. Oils too were added for certain types of malcontent of the outer form. Our nourishment is a similar duplication of the manufactured external body the deity leaves behind upon the pedestal. The combination of the 4 types of nourishment builds the body to withstand heat and cold and all types of atmospheric pressures from the outer world, and makes it convenient to live in. We always use what is available to us to nourish these bodies. The residents within the surrounding area around our temple bring to us out of their abundance. We usually find what we have is the perfect combination and use it according to the formula, the blowing of the wind and the temperature of the day. On this we thrive and live and do our work. When we found a fruit or nut or seed not tasty and delicious to complement this combination, though nourishing in itself and vital to our health, we fed it to our milk-producing animals, and they made the necessary adjustment for us. How milk is prepared and stored. The liquid from the animal was prepared in various ways. It was hardened, made to be thick or more liquid by adding water to it. The juices were crushed and molded into it, and all of this was always kept cool in our caves and clay and stone vats. Our nourishment was always served cool, as the natural heat of the body responded to this coolness and flamed up to warm it up. This aids in assimilation through our cells. Some of the temples are quite inventive, and others simple. In the colder climates the fruit is dried and taken there, as are the nuts and seeds. The milk is hardened to preserve it, and it is mixed together with warm water to melt the milk and moisten the fruit, and then chilled just below body temperature a few degrees. Herbs were also dried, and oils were taken to these mountainous places. However, a consistency of our nourishment persists through all of our people in all of the temples, except for those who are just emerging out of the animal kingdom. Their instinctive nerve system causes them to eat like the animals themselves, grasses and leaves, roots and plants, and the outgrowths of these organisms. In training a young monastic to prepare our nourishment, any handful of it that he would take and place in fertile soil should begin to grow. In this way it was assured that the balance of life-giving seeds existed without the entirety of the mixture. The seed hidden in the nourishment that will fertilize the soil to aid in its growth as it decomposed would sprout and soon become more nourishment. A simple exercise for health. Apart from our daily activity, we would perform an exercise. This exercise was performed 3 times a day, at sunrise, high noon, and sunset. We would hold the physical body immovable in certain difficult positions and breathe it strenuously. Breath pulses through the lungs while facing the sun's rays, consciously absorbing them into every cell of the body, kept it flexible, healthy, and easy to live in. Some of these positions in which we stand, our legs far apart, hands and arms stretched up high while breathing strenuously and very deeply until a tiredness comes to the body and leaves the body because of the new energy infused into it from the sun's rays and the breath. One leg outstretched and opposite arm both raised is another position we assumed. Still another position, standing erect, arms to the side, heels touching, head thrown back as far as possible facing the noonday sun. Letting the body assume a remedial pose. If the body ails or does not function properly, stand in the rays of the morning, noon, or evening sun, we are told, and move it vigorously to the count of 3. On the 3rd, move, stop, and hold the body in whatever position it naturally assumes as long as possible. It will of itself learn to assume the complementary position that will cure the discomfort through vigorous breathing and the rays of the sun. The forces of the body itself will be more inclined to appreciate the morning sun as it rises, opposed to noonday or sunset, or the other way around, as the case may be. This natural method of exercise, along with our nourishment and normal movement of the body through the day and night, is enough to keep all of its counterparts in harmony, one with another. Our only nourishment taken in the morning was fresh spring water in any quantity, large or small, or the juice of a tart or sour fruit. Preparing Earth for future yugas. We work with vibration more than physical things, for we are preparing this planet for a human life during the next several million years. Vital rays from other planets have to be polarized here, hooked into the planet at various spots so that the planetary balance will persist for mankind, of physical and mental equilibrium. This is our main purpose and activity during this yuga, and our laboratories in which we work within our minds provide this function. Nearly everything that we do is done with our mind, moving things, lifting things. This too, we are told, we will lose during the next yuga. Dismantling entire monasteries. When a monastery temple completely fulfilled its purpose, the darshan rays channeled there from the other planets became so strong that it became inconvenient to live comfortably within it. And when the time is right, the deity or our guru would tell us to dismantle the entire monastery and seal up the caves, leaving no trace that it ever existed. We would then form a lake where the monastery once was to polarize the cosmic darshan rays, knowing full well that in another yuga the vibration would be felt, and the monastery and temple that was there in the Akasha would form again on earth. In this way, these sacred spots were generated here and there over the surface of the earth to sustain the coming trials and tribulations of mankind, so that he would not in the future be completely lost for all time in the ravaging emotion of the animal kingdom. Power places of the future. It will be in the future, a million years from now, that on the shores of the body of water that this monastery in which I write will eventually become, souls such as myself perhaps will perform austerity in preparation for service to mankind. These areas, vast or small, in which we have been generating cosmic power since we came to this planet in the Sat Yuga, are beginning to become extremely strong. We have dismantled many of our monasteries, and we never will return in our physical bodies to the place in which they existed. We utilize the force field as training laboratories in the inner planes in helping new souls from other planets become prepared for a physical birth or a manifested body. Monastic redistribution, demonic guards. When we were given the order to dismantle the monastery, seal up the caves, and prepare the flow of water to form a lake through detouring a river, a series of streams, or often the deity would graciously help us by causing underground streams to occur, a portion of our population would be distributed into our monasteries, as when the work was complete, the remaining monastics also divided into small groups, and begged entrance into our temples. When the lake was formed where the monastery existed, polarizing the darshan to that spot through the nature of the substance water, we would plant trees around its shore to serve as homes for visiting devas who did not manifest in earthly bodies, but could live in the fibers of the trunks and larger branches of the trees, feed from the leaves, and communicate through the tree itself. Some were permanently stationed there as guards of this sacred place. These devas can move from tree to tree, and sometimes two or three would be found living in one tree. We were careful that no relic or article was left to be found before we left the area, never to return. The animals themselves would bypass these sanctified areas rather than walk through them, and through the power of our mesmerism, the animals would see the entire area surrounded by a sheath of fire. In this way, too, we protected our monasteries and temples before a wall was built. Continuity of monastic duties. In entering a new monastery temple, we were always given to do the same task that we were given before. What each one of us did was on the level of what we were able to do. We performed our daily routine with great care and precision, each one of us a specialist performing some particular part in the whole activity. If perchance we were to perform a different task, our guru or the deity himself would give the instructions through one of the senior members of the monastery. And so, when one monastery was dismantled and we moved on to assist in another, we offered all the skills and talents we employed in the previous monastery to the next one. It was in this way that we preserved our heritage without allowing too much earthly knowledge to jeopardize our purpose for serving the deity under the guidance of our guru. Training for priesthood began early with emphasis on inner matters, visions, and the quest for self. Having sat for long periods at the wall and gained entrance as a first test of sincerity, young monastics were regaled with true life stories of their tradition told by elders. They had time to play, to fly, and participate in music, art, drama, dance, and non-competitive games. The first months were a period of inner adjustment as they blended with the group vibration. Later they were taught to read in the Akasha, the book detailing the skill they would perform the rest of their life. Flying was always fun, and laughter accompanied it as techniques were perfected. After a few years, each one settled with the Guru's blessings into an artisan's family group, serving there tirelessly for the duration of his stay. Om. Grand souls took it seriously then to conceive in desireless manner sons for monastery service. Wisdom exceeded ignorance during this yuga. Each monastic who served provided added stability. Every year in a monastery changed a sadhaka's training and responsibilities. A sadhaka's spiritual capacity was recognized by elders to be limited according to his lineage, instinctive or otherwise. Guru Deva. Chapter 7. Monastic Training. All young people coming into our monastery would be carefully taught over a long period of time, and when one had learned his skill well, he performed it for the rest of his life. We are concerned more about inner visions, interplanetary travel, precisions, and communication, and our quest for the self rather than perfecting a multitude of external skills, going always deeper and deeper into the core of our being. Taking care of our monastery and temple consumed all of our time, and we followed a strict routine. We are told that this routine has not changed for thousands of years, each one of us performing one small part of it. Akashic manuscripts of procedure. Every aspect of a monastic's training was written for him in Akashic books. Every move of the hand in performance of his task, how and when to proceed, was designated there. Therefore, we knew exactly how to perform each task, where and when to gather in the monastery in small groups or large, but for the most part each one was alone, as the map for running the monastery was so precise that two of us were rarely found in the same place at the same time, unless the task to be performed required the presence of two or more. The senior always taught the junior, and in his training he was taught to read in the Akasha, the book that clearly outlined the simple skill that he was to perform in his function within the monastery. If he were to leave on a pilgrimage or tapas, someone else would fulfill this exact function in the exact same way. In this way, this vast machinery of beings worked on Earth, bringing through divine radiation from our other planets to this one, representative Lemurian priesthood. The Lemurian priesthood contains all of the phases of mind powers represented by different groups of individuals, from the least evolved on into the highest evolved. Each must be represented, none neglected. In the Lemurian culture, we tend to emphasize transcendental means as the mode of what we are all aspiring for, to set a standard for the ones of us coming out of the animal kingdom into human form. This cultural attitude should not exist in our temples and monasteries. Each one within the monastery should acquire a semblance of sameness, be he evolved or not evolved, be he in a manifested body or a body given birth to by a mammal human. This sameness should and must persist for the monastery to perform its function and for the deity to be able to do his work within the temple. We all know our deity and lords rule the temples. The gurus of our culture rule the monasteries. Each monastery of this great Lemurian priesthood blends so closely with the vibration of the darshan that only one person, one other person than the guru, should be felt to exist within the monastery, while in the temple there is one person, and the deity felt even though 1,000 may be present. Training from an early age. The training of the Lemurian priests begins at a very young age. A Lemurian becomes a priest in the monastery at the time he is initiated, and begins his training, or assumes his position of service, if he has already been trained in another monastery. To hold the force field strong so that the darshan persists when a group of Lemurian priests are together, each one must adhere to the dictate of grouping together in a line or a circle, always in succession according to the length of time each one has been in the monastery. Each one in the priesthood upon entering has direct contact with the guru. The band of devas in the monastery has the band of devas in the monastery and all our monasteries and our deity, the great Lord of the universe. Priesthood order by seniority. When a circle of priests was formed, it too was carefully grouped from left to right according to the length of time spent within the particular monastery. The more time the Lemurian priest stays within a monastery, the more of the darshan of that monastery he's able to disseminate. There can be others within the monastery not in the priesthood, but here to learn on a short or long tenure of stay. They must follow the same pattern as the priesthood as well as they understand it, but they do not have to adhere as directly because this group of beings move more frequently from monastery to monastery. It must be well known that all initiation be kept secret between the guru and the initiate. Neither initiations nor secretly imparted teachings shall change anything in the daily lives of Lemurian monastics. Training community elders. The elders of the communities surrounding our temple must impart the teachings, raise the children, and train some of them for entrance into our monasteries. Only in this way will Lemuria persist and be strong on this planet. The elders may visit and live in the monasteries, take written teachings back to their homes, and learn to read from the Akashic libraries. It is the responsibility of all Lemurian gurus to carefully choose young men to study with our elder men in their homes before entering the priesthood. This, then, will be the training for the elder himself, as he will enter the priesthood in his next life at a very early age. If this be the case, he should be taken into the monastery from his parents' home and be raised by the monastics, for he will remember the training he gave to many young monastics in his last incarnation. Calculating monastic age. Our time is calculated according to the moon circling the earth. Therefore, an elder who trained monastics in his last life, entering the monastery at one circle of age in this present life, would grow up year by year. Every 2 moons from one circle form one circle while living in the intensity of the Lemurian monastery. Generally, one circle would equal 12 moons. In this way, the monastic age is calculated accurately, and each one has the same starting point, be he 1 circle or 20 circles of physical age. When taken from the wall for the first time, the young Lemurian must be 1 circle of monastic age, and then increasingly every 2 months another circle. The second and third circles. During the second circle in the monastery, his training must be then similar to a child's training in the ages between 6 and 12 circles. During the third circle of 12 moons, he is looked at as between the ages of 12 and 18, and it was generally during this time he became initiated and entered the Lemurian priesthood. During this time between the monastic ages of 12 and 18, more strenuous demands must be placed upon him, as he is no longer considered a child. Nevertheless, his elders must supervise him well. The elders would be their more senior. During the Lemurian monastic's fourth circle in the monastery, from the monastic age of 18 to 24, he must settle in what he has been trained to do and perform these duties for the duration of his time in the monastery, perhaps for the rest of his life. Exceptions to training norms. Education, being a predominant part of our culture, changes this pattern and is the only way that this pattern within the monastery can be changed. Should the monastic begin to make tremendous literary contributions to our culture that begin to become used by the elder men of our community, or if he emanates tremendous darshan as a result of his personal evolution, intensified by his disciplines, only then would he be released from some of his duties that he had been trained to perform within the monastery or temple. Training is outlined in ancient texts. Each Lemurian monastic's training is clearly outlined in Akashic manuscripts year by year, according to the ratio of one circle equaling 6 monastic years. Throughout the duration of his life, some of these manuscripts are so precise and detailed in day-to-day description of inner practice for our Lemurian monastics of 100 years of age and on, that only the most astute are able to follow these disciplines. It is our gurus who have access to the chartered course given within these manuscripts, which were prepared on the planet whence we came, carefully placed within the Akasha, there to be read here by the gurus of Lemuria. Latitude for new monastics. Through the first 6 months within the monastery after coming from the wall, all should come to know the newcomer, and he must be taught through telling him the favorite stories of the monastery, by playing games with him and blending him into the group. Sports of all kinds have always been a part of our culture ever since we came to the planet. They keep our culture strong, as while we perform in a group, we lose all external awareness of oneself. A new monastic should not be given much responsibility until he is well into his second circle, or between 9 and 12 monastic years old. Up until that time, he should be told stories and taught the subtleties of conduct, which only by living in the monastery one can learn, and enter into the many physical and mental games that are played each day. It is in the third circle, between the monastic age of 12 and 18, that he should be given tests of will, strength, and valor, a lot more recreation, and stories about how positive accomplishments for our culture have been made in the past and will be made in the future. Still yet, during the ages of 12 to 18, little direct responsibility should be given to him, but shouldered by the senior Lemurian priests that are training him. The giving of personal responsibility. Between 12 and 18 monastic years old is the time that personal discipline is given to him, and when he usually is initiated as a permanent member of the monastic order, the priesthood. It is in this third circle of his monastic years, between 12 and 18, that a personal interest must be shown in him by his elders as to his ability to remember the teachings and the stories by examination, as to how philosophically astute he is. This attention should be given to him closer to the end of the third circle, between 16 and 18 monastic years. The outcome of how well he had performed his disciplines then becomes apparent, and he is placed in the appropriate permanent position of service within the monastery. Allowances during the third year. The routine for a Lemurian monastic going into this third monastic circle must never be terrifically strict in any way. They must be given time to play, to be young and move here and there, or from monastery to monastery, if they are helpers on projects that their elders have initiated. It is only in the fourth circle that they settle down to regulated activity. 4 periods of time. Define the first years of training within the monastery. After acceptance, the Sadaka was given half a year to adjust to his newfound life, to meditate and learn his mantra, all the while given the best of care. After 2 passages of earth around the sun, he was introduced to the culture of inwardness and taught about his animal lineage, how it influenced his future pattern and expressions of service and relationship in the monastery. After 3 years had passed, he was guided in pragmatic individual training by a senior monastic. In his 5th year, he received responsibilities of his own, being expected to perform his known duties productively. These days and months and years were those of training, discipline, learning, and testing. Failure was not an option at all. How peaceful was life in the days when monastics ruled the earth, the peace of greater understanding among peoples. The monasteries were abundantly populated. It was a custom to dedicate a son to live within them, or to train to reincarnate to be a worthy resident. The training was compassionate yet strict. Games, philosophy, and daily duties were considered necessary for well-being. Gurudeva.